All right, we're back with Florida rulemaking. You may hear my dog barking in the background. I do apologize. He's being very naughty. So, the Florida administrative process is pretty much the same thing. We have a statutory authority from a Florida legislature, which gives the agency the power to make the regulations, called an enabling statute. The agency drafts the rule. It's published. The proposed rule is published in the Florida Administrative Register, right? So we have the Federal Register, we have the Florida Administrative Register. At least they're both called Register, right? And that's abbreviated FAR. We have a notice and comment period. We're going to show you where you find all that on flrules.org. Final rule gets drafted based on the comments. In Florida, it's a little different from federal. So in federal, remember, we had the proposed rule. After the comments, we had the final rule published in the Federal Register and then codified in the CFR. They do not publish a final rule in Florida unless there were changes from the proposed rule. So if the proposed rule is published and there's comments and they decide we're not making any changes, it's the same as the final rule will be the same as the proposed rule, they will not republish it in the Florida Administrative Register. It just goes straight to codification in what we call the Florida Administrative Code, the FAC. So the FAC is the Florida equivalent of the CFR. All right. Florida Administrative Register, just like the Federal Register, daily publication. This is by the Florida Department of State. Contains the text of proposed rules, the status of rules moving through the whole process with Florida state agencies, notices of meetings and hearings. It's all available on flrules.org as far back as 1999. From 1962 until 2012, the agencies published their proposed and final rules in a weekly publication that was called the Florida Administrative Weekly, but then they switched to the FAR. Proposed Florida rule, anatomy, has an agency, department, and division name, a rule number, a rule title, purpose and effect of the proposed rule, summary, the enabling statute, the rulemaking authority, the statutes, the Florida statutes, the laws that are going to be affected by this, text of the proposed rule, and contact information. Florida Administrative Code is the equivalent of the CFR. So, same thing. All of the Florida regulations that are published in the Register, the FAR, the Florida Administrative Register, are divided up by topic and put into 74 titles in the Florida Administrative Code. And each title in the case of Florida corresponds to a different agency. So every agency has its own title. That's the way they divided it up by subject area. And all of this is on flrules.org. A Florida rule has a rule number and a name, the text, the authority, the laws implemented, and it will give you the history. We're going to look at one in detail. So here's an example. We have our rulemaking authority. That's step one. Here in this, we have Florida Statute 322.02, and it's talking about what needs to be done, right? The legislature finds that the department and county tax collectors have entered into these contracts about driver's licenses, yada, yada. Number two, the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles is charged with the administration and function of enforcement of the provisions. And then subsection 6, the department shall make and adopt rules and regulations for the orderly administration of this chapter. So, a law is implemented, right? We have this implement about driver's license and competence to hold one. The agency now has to promulgate a rule, right? So you can see here, it's in the Florida Administrative Register, right? That's where the proposed rules go. Notice of development of rulemaking. The purpose of these amendments is to revise driver's license standards on exams and yada yada. Then in Florida, there's often a public meeting where it's discussed. They will publish the time and place of the public meeting, where it's going to be, the subject matter that's going to be considered, about the approval of that proposed rule. Here's the publication of the proposed rule 15A-1.015 driving ability. Okay, this one was published in the Florida Administrative Register in volume 40, page 1239, back on March 19th, 2014. And then we have the final rule, Florida Admin Code, right? So this is Florida, so we're used to using Florida Rule of Appellate Procedure 9.800, right? For whatever reason, Florida Bar forgot to create a rule to cite to the Florida Administrative Register with 9.800. So instead, we have to use the Blue Book. When there is no rule in 9.800, we defer to the Blue Book. So for the Administrative Register, you're going to use the Blue Book. And this is the proper citation format, as you can see it there. Volume, FLA, Admin, Reg. All right, 4705, and the date. Now, the Florida Administrative Code, they did actually come up with a rule in 9.800. And so this is how you cite to the Florida Administrative Code. FLA, Admin, Code R, period, and the number. Okay? So if the rule has been repealed, then you do put the year, but otherwise you don't put the year because it's considered current. So it'll be, you don't need a year. If for any reason you were out of state and you needed to cite to the Florida Administrative Code or in a federal, pleading for some reason, you would use the Blue Book. This is the Blue Book rule. As you can see, it's a little different. It actually uses the annotated code. It has a little small r there. It always includes the year. So just be sure you're clear on which one you're using. Official sources of administrative law. So you can see them side by side. Over on Florida, enabling statute and the Florida statutes. Federal enabling statute would be in the U.S. Code. Proposed rule. In Florida, it's published in the Florida Administrative Register, the FAR, right? In federal, it's published in the Federal Register, FedReg. Over in Florida, if it hasn't changed from the proposed rule, they didn't make any changes to the final rule, they're not going to publish that final rule in the Florida Administrative Register. It will go straight to the codified rule in the Florida Administrative Code. No matter whether changes were made or not in the federal system, there's always a final rule published in the Federal Register. And then ultimately a codified rule in the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulation. We have in class 2. I'm going to try to just move right on into this. So you can see here, you run a boutique firm that specializes in hotels and restaurants. Your client has all these hotels that are famous for swim-up bars in their pools, and they're in other states, but they want to bring them to Florida. So he knows that there have been recent rule changes regarding swim-up bars in Florida. He's a very informed client, isn't he? And he wants to better understand what these regulations are. Specifically, what kind of signage is required and what type of recirculation system he needs. So we're going to go to flrules.org. We're going to use Rule 9.800. And we're going to find a citation, make a citation to the section of the Florida Administrative Code. Okay, so we're jumping straight to the codified version, right? That establishes operation requirements for swim-up bars in hotel pools. So this is flrules.org. I think if I do, I need to refresh that page. Come on, page. Let me go to home. There you go. So you can see here, here's our full text search. You can either search the code here. You can search the register here. Or you can do the drop down and search the code or the register. So your choice. So, swim up, bar, signage. I'm going to try that. Here we go. Okay, let's see what we got. We have something called operational requirements. It's taking a minute to load, isn't it? Oh my goodness. There we go. All right. Here is what the rule looks like on FL rules. So what questions did we want? We wanted the site. So we know that there is rule 9.800 for the code, not for the register in Florida, but for the code. And the abbreviation is FLA admin code, capital R period, and the number. So you see 64E-9.004 period. And that's where we are, right? 64E-9.004. That's where that came from. That's the rule number. Authority. What Florida agency, department, and division issued this rule? Right there. Department, Department of Health, Division, Division of Environmental Health. Are there any proposed rules that may impact this rule? So that's how the kind of funny way you read this one. This is, think of it chronologically, most recent at the top, going backward in time, in history, to things that have happened. So if the top thing is the most recent and it's a final rule, then there's nothing proposed to amend it right now, right? It is still, if there was something proposed, it would be at the very top because it would be the most recent thing. So kind of a weird way to think of it backward that way. So no, if it says final rule at the top, there's no proposed rules. The proposed rule would be the thing at the top because we're going chronologically, most recent down to older stuff. What is the rulemaking authority for the rule? That's all here in the history notes. Rulemaking authority. So that's Florida statutes, right? 38.1.006 and 5104.021. You can see 38, there we are. And what laws are being implemented by this? Oh dear, what did I do? That is not a happy thing. Did my internet die? I will be very sad. No, okay. Here we go. Law implemented. There are three. 381.006, 514.021, 514.031. FS means Florida statutes. My PowerPoint is very unhappy with me. Oh, come on, man. Don't do this to me. I apologize. I'm going to show you what the rest is because I know what it is. It wants to know when was the most recent change, most recent proposed rule. So you go down the line. Final, there was a change after this proposed rule, right? So there was a proposed rule here, October 3rd, 2022, right? They made some changes, they had a hearing, and then they finally came up with this final rule. Oh my goodness, we're going to go all the way to the bottom. I apologize. I don't know why it freaked out on me. Okay, we got all that. Most recent. When was this rule most recently amended? June 11th, 2023. You're going to give a citation. Okay, it did not actually want you to go back to the old proposed rule. I thought it did. But let me show you what that's looking for. It was most recently amended, the most recent final rule. The proposed rule was published when? We looked at that. Okay, here, 10/3/2022. To make the citation, you have to click that. Okay, I'm pretty sure this is in the homework, so be sure you understand that. You click that, then you have to click entire issue to get the page number. 4041. See that? Okay. Here's the full text of the proposed rule. It's in volume 48, number 192, and that's the date. But the page number is there, and the only way to get there is by clicking entire issue, and the only way to get there is by clicking this box. Okay? So now you'll see volume 48, FLA Admin Reg. That's the page number, that 4041, and then the date. And that's it. All right, I'm going to post all this to Canvas. I will post the homework. It should match these in class. And we have for office hours on Monday at 3:30. I'll post which classroom I got. I think it's 285. I'm not sure which one, B. But I'll post it for sure in an announcement. And we will go through all of this again if any of you want to come in person, and we'll go through all of it. So I missed you this week. I hope you had a great week, and I look forward to seeing you all on Monday.